So the title of my talk actually is a little bit different to the one that Tom read out. It's actually quite a personal journey, science, crystallography, reflections, a journey with the PDB over 35 years. So 50 years ago, the Protein Data Bank was born. And for 35 of those 50 Protein Data Bank years, I have been part of the incredible PDB journey. Everyone who loves proteins loves the Protein Data Bank. This 50th birthday celebration is a tangible demonstration of that. If you were to ask 100 scientists what it is that they love about the PDB, what do you think they would say? Well, wonder no more, because this presentation will answer that exact question. The top 5 reasons to love the PDB. Actually, I didn't ask 100 people. Instead, in the best traditions of viral social media posts, I came up with the answer myself. So I'm going to tell you for free my own few opinions as to the top 5 reasons to love the PDB. You may agree, you may disagree. We can argue the toss in the question and answer session at the end. But before I begin, I need to orient you to let you know where I'm broadcasting from. I'm based at the University of Wollongong, which is an Australian university with an Aboriginal name. And so I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which the University of Wollongong is situated, the lands of the Wadi people of Dharawal country. I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past and present, who are the knowledge holders and teachers, and I acknowledge their continued spiritual and cultural connection to country. I'd also like to thank Aboriginal artist Josie Rose, who created this beautiful painting for the University of Wollongong. It hangs in the foyer of the building in which I work, the building I'm broadcasting from, and I'm fortunate to see and be inspired by it every day. So where exactly, I hear you ask, is the University of Wollongong? That's you asking the question. You can see Australia in the bottom right-hand corner there, also shown here. So there's Australia, this is China, Asia, and then if we zoom into Australia, we have Papua New Guinea, New Zealand, and I'm sure most of you have heard of Sydney, which is one of the largest cities in Australia. So Wollongong is about an hour's drive south of Sydney, and it's a beautiful coastal town, city, actually, a beautiful coastal city. This is an aerial view of Wollongong, which is unique because it has 2 lighthouses, and I am very fortunate to live in one of these buildings here, have the most beautiful view every morning. I feel I'm in a holiday resort every time I wake up and open the curtains. And there is beautiful coastal scenery and rainforest nearby that I get to walk in. And of course, we can't take visitors at the moment, but once borders open, please do come and visit. We love to show off our country. Now, back to the topic of this presentation. Imagine yourself 35 years ago handing in your computational chemistry master's research thesis. You've just spent 2 years laboriously evaluating the molecular conformations of dozens of opioid analgesics, then using that to develop a pharmacophore of the mu opioid receptor to explain the molecular basis for their activity. That pharmacophore provided a starting point for the rational design of new and better analgesics. During those 2 years of research, you'd heard stories whispered in the corridors, fantastical stories that couldn't possibly be true, stories about a library of protein structures that could be accessed simply by requesting it, and it came on tape. I used to dream of that library, dream that it contained the structure of my mu opioid receptor. How much easier would my master's research have been? I never thought that in my lifetime, the day would come that I could access the structure of the mu opioid receptor. And yet there it is now. And you don't need a tape reader to access it. The PDB provides data. Beautiful data that is just so beautiful and organized that that I love it. I love the data, and I love lots of data. So the top 5 reasons to love the Protein Data Bank: open access data. Now to another story that puts this into context. The same person that was a master's student 35 years later, that's me, last week in my role as Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research at the University of Wollongong, I participated in a review of a centre of excellence in a field that doesn't involve proteins, but which does involve lots of data and dozens of laboratories around the world. The major legacy of that centre, that's been operating for about 4 years, is the establishment of a high-quality open access data repository. The repository is defined by rigorous attention to detail, quality rating criteria, visualization tools. The data are findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. Where have I heard all that before? The centre review gave me pause to think and thank yet again the architects and custodians of the Protein Data Bank for having the foresight to establish such an incredibly valuable resource, a resource for the collective benefit of everyone, not just for the contributors, but for many different end users. So many decades ago, the PDB was open access and devised along FAIR principles long before those terms were invented. So let's move along. Now we come to my PhD studies, which I undertook at Oxford University. And that's where I combined drug discovery research with protein crystallography. I became immersed in structural biology and found myself working with giants in the field. Peter Goodford for drug design, Louise Johnson, protein crystallography, were my co-supervisors. And while I never worked with Dorothy Hodgkin, she, at the age of, in her late 70s and early 80s, still came along to the seminars in the Laboratory for Molecular Biophysics. This photo of me is taken at my graduation, standing in front of the Divinity Hall. And if it seems a little familiar to you, you are probably a fan of Harry Potter, because it's also used in those movies as the infirmary. So as part of my PhD, I learned a lot about protein crystallography. And I learned that, first of all, I produced my first 4 protein crystal structures, which have these ID numbers, PDB IDs. And the GPB stands for glycogen phosphorylase B. So I solved 4 different structures of glycogen phosphorylase B, which is a target for anti-diabetic drugs. But I've also been involved in a number of other parts of crystallography, including the International Union of Crystallography, showing this photo from the General Assembly some years ago now, with 2 more of my mentors in protein crystallography, Mitchell Guss and Peter Coleman, also giants in the field of crystallography. And we know that the Protein Data Bank is very closely associated with the crystallography community and has worked together with the crystallography community to develop standards for publication and for validation. I'm also associated with the Asian Crystallographic Association, where I'm the immediate past president. And this is a photo taken from the final session at the Singapore meeting, which also coincidentally held in December 2019, is the last international meeting I've been able to attend in person. So you can see there are a large number of people, young people, early career researchers, showing their the prizes. And the PDB provides poster prizes to many young researchers. So another reason to love the Protein Data Bank is it's part of a very collaborative and welcoming community that values research integrity, that ensures that the data that we deposit is validated and accessible. And you know, this crystallography community is one of the first communities that associated publication with data deposition. And I'm really proud to be part of that community. But the PDB also supports early career researchers through poster prizes and conferences. As a postdoctoral researcher, I spent my time at Rockefeller University working with John Kurian. That's a photo of me. You can see it's a long time ago because look at that computer. This was taken in the early 90s. And you'll see beside that computer is a book labeled DSB, which is a protein that has stayed with me since that time. I continue to work on the protein it's actually DSBA, stands for disulfide bond protein A. And I solved that structure while I was at the Rockefeller University. The reason we were looking at this protein is because it's involved in introducing, it's essential for introducing disulfide bonds into proteins in bacteria. And that makes it essential for bacterial virulence. It acts a bit like a weapons assembly machinery of bacteria. If you knock out this protein, knock out the gene coding for this protein, bacteria are no longer pathogenic because they can't make the virulence factors or weapons that cause disease. So we've been very interested in trying to develop inhibitors of this protein by targeting that active site and that protein-protein interaction site. But what I wanted to point out here, and I could have pointed out with glycogen phosphorylase B protein structures, is the PDB code for this crystal structure, 1DSB. Because another reason that I love the Protein Data Bank was that we were able to choose the PDB code for our favorite proteins. You can't do that anymore, but I was very privileged to have that opportunity to choose the PDB code for my favorite protein, DSBA. I've actually solved, I think Hao talked about the number of protein structures in her name in the Protein Data Bank. I'm just going to show you 4 other structures that have been deposited from my lab. And I think in total, I've got over 130 structures in the Protein Data Bank. But what I wanted to point out here is the huge diversity of protein structures that are revealed by having a database by having the Protein Data Bank. The diversity is such that the very clever Mark Howarth in the University of Oxford generated an alphabet of protein structures from A, B, C, right down to Z, which means that you can now use protein structures as your very own personalized font. And just putting in another picture of people that I've been very privileged to work with, Yvonne Jones and Giovanna Scarpin on the IUCr 50th course. So IUCr celebrated its 50th course in 2017. And for our motto, we used the font of proteins taken from the Protein Data Bank. And the topic was very appropriate for the Protein Data Bank as well. It was integrative structural biology, using hybrid methods to look at protein structure. So another top reason to love the Protein Data Bank is because it shows us the beautiful diversity of protein structure. And that can also be used in another way that we've used creatively in my lab to make cakes of proteins. So my lab in 2014, the International Year of Crystallography, my apologies, it's very early in the morning here and the birds are just waking up. I hope that's not disturbing the sound that you're getting. But in 2014, my lab decided to celebrate the birthdays of famous crystallographers by making crystal cakes or protein cakes. In this case, we were celebrating the birthday of Ada Yonath, and Maria Halili, an early career researcher in my lab, made a ribosome cake showing the two subunits, the nucleotides, and I can tell you that it was ridiculously delicious, that chocolate cake. And it was one of about 20 different crystal cakes that we celebrated during the year. And at the end of the year, when we'd run out of ideas, we decided to have a workshop and decorate cupcakes in different protein crystallography associated aspects. Now, I won't go through all of them, and I hope you can see my my arrow, but here is DSBA with its disulfide bonds, its partner protein DSBB, including showing the ubiquinone cofactor, it's a membrane protein. We were also looking at zinc transporters. So here's a zinc molecule and some YFP attached to the protein. And well, there's all sorts of other things, synchrotron, snare protein, crystal lattice, etc. So we had a lot of fun and enjoyed eating those cakes. So a top 5 reason to love the Protein Data Bank, in my view, is that you can celebrate and create, and you can make crystal cakes and enjoy them. And what I haven't done, unfortunately, due to lack of time, is that I haven't made a cake to celebrate the 50th birthday of the Protein Data Bank. So in summary, what are the top 5 reasons to love the Protein Data Bank? Firstly, it provides open access data, rich source of data with fair principles and a myriad number of applications, including in my particular case, and you've heard in the 2 previous talks about drug discovery development. The Protein Data Bank is part of a very warm, collaborative community that values research integrity above everything else. Personally, I'm very pleased that I got to choose a PDB code for my favorite protein, 1DSB. The PDB provides curation, visualization, and analysis of protein structures. And of course, you can use that in any way you like, in a creative way. And it also reveals to anyone who wants to look through that amazing resource, the wonder and awe of nature. And in closing, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. In closing, here's another photo from Wollongong, also showing the wonder and awe of nature and of people's ingenuity. This is the Sky Bridge, the Seacliff Bridge in Wollongong. And it just remains for me to thank you and wish the PDB a very happy birthday. Here's to the next 50 years of PDB and the 1 millionth structure. And so I think I will stop sharing my screen and hand back to Tom.
Well, thank you, Jenny, for that fabulous talk. And it's interesting to hear your perspective on 35 years of the PDB. And it is amazing, as I said earlier, to think that we went from 7 structures in 1973 to where we are today, thanks to contributions from all 3 of our speakers this afternoon and from this amazing community. And I'm wondering, to kick off the questions, I'm wondering, you know, how you see things developing over, say, the next 5 to 10 years. You mentioned the maybe going from where we are now to 1 million structures, but where do you think the really most exciting areas lie at the moment, perhaps with new techniques or new areas that we'll be delving into?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think these exciting things are already happening for me. I talked about the Integrative Structural Biology Conference in IUCr, and it was very apparent then, and in the work that I've been doing, that we now need more than one technique. We need to combine different techniques to look at protein structures and to understand how proteins operate. So I think the integrative aspect, and as a structural biologist that focuses specifically on drug discovery, I think the opportunity to look at to evaluate and validate the interactions and the geometry of small molecules bound to large molecules, just as an extra validation tool for those working with drug protein interactions is something that I'm very excited about. But look, I started, as I said, 35 years ago, and I couldn't have imagined the sorts of things that have happened in that time. I think in the next 10 years we will see huge change in structural biology that will further challenge the PDB to store and make accessible data that's of high quality and rigorous.
Thank you. This morning, Speaker Alexander mentioned that dynamics was perhaps one of the great things, and he showed the cartoon of a movie, and it seems that perhaps that's an area where certainly it could challenge the PDB, as he mentioned, but also just a whole new dimension, because still primarily we're still looking at snapshots in a movie, and kinetics is just so central to everything, obviously, in biology.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. It's the ability to see how a protein works, how it does its job. After all, proteins are the doing molecules of the body. And it's really important that we see what they're actually doing, not just a snapshot, as you say, of one aspect of their, something that's been captured by a particular method. So dynamics, absolutely. And I guess the other thing that the community has talked about is the storage of raw data, the original images, how we're going to manage that, because I think that is something that is a challenge for everyone, but we want to make available to anybody who wants to access those images, especially developers, software developers, so that we can gather more out of those original data sets than perhaps current methods can glean.
Well, thank heavens that we're not still trying to send things out to you by magnetic tape as we were back in the early days.
It was, look, I would have loved to have received a magnetic tape to download that mu opioid receptor, that's for sure. Unfortunately, it didn't happen at the time, but you know what? You learn a lot by working at the first principles.